everybody. So great to be here this morning. This is my first ever extravaganza. I've been here a few years and I've never been around for an extravaganza, so this is exciting, super exciting. So great to be able to celebrate Christmas this morning, and particularly to focus on Joseph, because I feel like actually maybe we don't spend enough time looking at Joseph in the Christmas story. We talk, obviously, rightly a lot about Jesus. I mean, hooray for Jesus. And we talk about the wise men and the shepherds and Mary and even Herod. But actually, Joseph has an incredible story. So it's great to be able to spend some time this morning looking at that. So Joseph was an ordinary man. Joseph was a carpenter, probably in his mid to late 20s, originally from Bethlehem, but currently lived in a place called Nazareth. And Joseph was engaged. He was about to get married to a lovely, ordinary girl called Mary. But one day, everything changes. An angel appears to Mary, doesn't she, and tells her that she's going to have a baby given to her by God. Now, I think Mary must have felt a bunch of different emotions, right? I bet Mary probably felt a little bit scared. I mean, she was a teenager and she was going to have to give birth to this baby. I bet Mary also felt excited. Mary was going to carry the Son of God. I mean, what an honor, what a privilege for her. And I also think Mary was probably fairly nervous to tell Joseph. I mean, from his perspective, it didn't sound great, did it? Let's be real. And I wonder what Joseph felt when Mary said, "Look, Joseph, I'm pregnant." And obviously, he wasn't the father. I mean, talk about an awkward conversation, right? It's a little bit awkward, that one. And Joseph probably felt upset and angry. It sounded like Mary wasn't being faithful to their commitment to get married. But here we see something of Joseph's really godly character. In Matthew 1:19, it says, Joseph was faithful to the law, but he did not want to shame her in public. So he planned to divorce her quietly. Now, this is an understandable reaction. Joseph is a just man. He tries to live in the right way in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of God. And in the eyes of those things, it was only right that him and Mary separated, because it seemed that Mary wasn't being faithful to their commitment to get married. But also, Joseph, being a good man and a kind man, decided to separate from her quietly without stirring up a big fuss. And isn't this so different from our society today? I mean, when a celebrity does something scandalous, it's plastered all over the news and all over social media, or even, within our friendship groups, when someone we love does something to upset us. Very quickly, a lot of people know, don't they? And they start to get involved, and it all gets a bit messy. So the fact that Joseph divorces her quietly shows that Joseph really loved God, and Joseph loved Mary as well, because he didn't want to put Mary to shame. So just from this part of the story alone, we see something of Joseph's godly and good character. So Joseph has got a plan, right? Joseph is planning to divorce Mary, but being a kind man, he says, I'll do this quietly. I'll try not to get loads of people involved. But again, everything changes one night when Joseph is tucked up in bed, asleep, probably having a nice dream, and an angel from God visits him in this dream. And kids, can anyone remember, what did the angel tell Joseph in the dream? Can anyone remember? Yes. Do you want to come and say it into the microphone? That Mary was going to have a baby, yep. Do you remember what the angel said to Joseph in particular about this baby? Yeah. His name would be called Jesus, absolutely. Any other things? Yeah. He will be the Son of God. There we go, yes. So the angel tells Joseph that, Mary's going to have this baby, but don't worry, this baby is from God. So get married to Mary. It's all okay. And this completely changes things for Joseph, because he gets married to Mary and he gives birth to this baby boy, who they call Jesus, just as God had told him to. Now, Joseph is obedient to God. Obedience is when we do something that we're asked to do. So kids, and I feel your pain on this one, when at home you're asked to do the washing up and there's nothing you want to do less than the washing up, but you do it anyway, that is obedience. or when we get given a task at work that we need to complete, or when we're paying our taxes, whatever it looks like, there are so many opportunities for obedience and disobedience around us. I'm going to possibly divide the room here, but put your hands up if you're a dog person. Put your hands up if you're a cat person. Oh, okay, there's more cat people than I was expecting. I feel like this is quite a dog person church. Maybe that's just the staff team. Now, when we think about obedience, dogs are a really great example. I mean, not cats. Cats literally do whatever they want. They're in a world of their own. But dogs are known for being loyal and obedient creatures, or animals. This creature's a bit rude. But this obedience doesn't start straight away, does it? I mean, a dog builds up a relationship or a friendship with its owner. The owner loves and cares for the dog, and the dog learns to trust its owner and trust that what the owner asks it to do is good. So when a dog hears its name called in a dark forest, it runs back to its owner. Or when an owner says sit or lie down, the dog does it. The dog trusts that the thing that the owner is asking it to do is a good thing. And obedience requires this relationship, or maybe a better word is friendship. Obedience requires a friendship. It requires someone to trust that there is a good reason for what they're being asked to do, even if we can't actually see what that reason might be. And it's the same for us and God. For us to obey God, we need to first have a friendship with him. We need to trust that God has a good purpose for us and for our lives. And Joseph as well. Joseph had a really strong friendship with God. If we look at this story, Joseph obeyed God by marrying Mary and raising Jesus, even though he was probably quite scared, because he trusted that God had a good plan. And this is another key thing about obedience. Obedience doesn't mean not feeling afraid. Obedience doesn't mean not feeling scared of what might happen. But obedience is trusting God in the middle of that fear. Joseph didn't have all of the answers. Joseph certainly didn't fully understand God's plan, but Joseph said yes anyway. Joseph obeyed in the middle of his fear and his doubt because he trusted that God had a good plan for him and for Jesus. Now, to demonstrate this idea of trust and obedience, I want you to imagine just for a moment that I am an alien from a distant universe. Can you imagine that? Picture me however you want. I give you permission. And imagine that I'm an alien from this distant planet who has never, ever seen a chair before. I don't know what a chair is. I've never sat on one. It's this weird, shape. Here is the chair. How would you try to convince me that this chair is real and that I can trust it? Maybe you would go for the sort of scientific route. You'd say, well, the metal is made up of these certain molecules, and, the way that science works, you can tell I do theology and not science, the way that science works means that it's going to hold you, it's rigid, it will make sense. Or maybe if you're a mathematician, you would check the angles and say, well, the wheels are at this angle and the base is attached to it in this way, so therefore you can trust it. Or maybe you would say, look, Hannah, or alien, whatever my alien name is, you might say, I've sat on a chair before. I am an experienced chair sitter. In fact, I am a professional chair sitter. So maybe you could say, well, I've done it, and the chair can hold me up, so the chair will hold you up. You could give me all of the knowledge and information about how this chair works and how it could hold me up, but the only way for me to really, truly know that this chair will hold my weight is to sit on it. It's actually really comfy. The only way for me to know that this chair will hold me up is to choose to trust it and to sit on it anyway. And I think Joseph was put in a similar position. God could have told him and tried to explain all of his vast, detailed plans that he's had since he laid the foundations of the earth. God could have tried to answer all of Joseph's questions. But the only way for Joseph to really trust God's plans was to say yes, was to obey God, was to sit on the chair, was to marry Mary and to raise Jesus. Joseph was obedient because he chose to trust in God. And ultimately, Joseph's obedience mirrors Jesus. What greater example of obedience than Jesus' death on the cross? Before his death, we read in the Bible that Jesus is praying in the garden, and he says, God, is there any other way? Is there any other way that you can go about your plans than this? But then he says, and this is what's so powerful, he says, yet not my will, but your will be done. Isn't that amazing? Even though Jesus knew he was about to face the most horrible death, he chose to trust God because he trusted that God had a good plan. Because Jesus, the Son of God, trusts that his Father's plans are good. So at Christmas, as we focus on the birth of the baby Jesus, let's also remember what we celebrate all year round, but particularly at Easter, that Jesus died and came back to life again to rescue us from all the things that we do wrong. Because we wouldn't have that story if we didn't have the story of Christmas. So let's remember both as we celebrate this morning. And so as we come into land, let us, like Joseph and ultimately like Jesus, trust and obey God. Let's listen to God. Let's hear what he's saying to us. Let's hear how he's challenging us to live. And then let's say yes to God. Let's be obedient to him, even when actually we feel really afraid of what that might mean. And maybe you're thinking, well, yes, I agree, this is great. I'd love to obey God. I'd love, I hear what he's saying, but how do I actually do this? How do I actually obey God when his plan feels so completely different from my own? How do we do it then? Well, I think that's a difficult question. But ultimately, we spend time with him, because the more time that we spend with God, the more our plans become like his plans. Now, I don't know if you've ever noticed, maybe children at school or at kids' clubs here, or maybe for us at work or at home, when you spend a lot of time with a person or a group of people, you very slowly start to become a little bit more like them, for better and for worse. I hear that. And particularly, I think, in our language. I've had the joy of living with some of my closest friends at Moorlands on the same corridor for the last few years. And I love watching how our language affects each other. So at the beginning of term, someone will have a phrase or a word that they just keep saying in random conversations. And literally 2 weeks later, all of us are saying the same words or phrases. And I'm sure you've noticed this as well at home or at work or wherever you spend lots of time. But we become like those that we spend time with. We become like those we spend time with. So we can apply that to God. The more time that we spend with God, the more we love him. The more our plans start to line up with his. And that doesn't mean that there aren't times that God will still ask us of something different that we're not expecting. But we can trust that God is good. We sung it earlier today, haven't we? God is good. Every hour, every minute, God is good. So we can trust that his plans are good and we can obey him in that. So let's listen to God and obey him, following the examples of Joseph and of Jesus.